Thank you for joining us for this week's message at Crosswind Church. In this series, Dear Brothers, Sincerely Joseph, Jeremy will be guiding us through the book of Genesis, revealing a lesson on forgiveness. If you have any questions about this message or about Crosswind Church, please visit our website, www.crosswindchurch.net, or send us an email at info@crosswindchurch.net.
All right. So last week we began a brand new series that we're calling Dear Brothers, Sincerely Joseph. And we're doing this series just a little bit differently than we've done other series. And so I just want to give this little disclaimer on the front end. Normally what we do when we talk together on Sunday morning is we kind of cover a topic. And then at the very end of it, I kind of say, so here's some things we can do to kind of implement that in your life immediately. And you'll get some of that every week. But this whole series I'm thinking of as one big, gigantic sermon. So what I need you to do is do me a favor. I need you to not miss a week, okay? Because it's going to be a part of the story that I want you to understand. So if you did miss a week, if you missed last week, you're behind, but that's okay. You can go to our website, crosswindchurch.net, and click on resources, and you can go and watch the video from last week. You can go to iTunes and subscribe to our podcast, and you can listen to last week's message. And we want to bring you along in this story as we look at the story of the life of Joseph together. Now, that having been said, I wanted to ask a question, and I need a show of hands. This is audience participation time. How many of you all have dreams that you remember? Like you go to sleep, you have dreams that you remember. Okay, all right, hands down. How many of you all have ever felt at some point in time in your life that God has given you a dream? Like He's said, He's given you a message. This is for me. Raise your hand. Any of you? There's less hands there. Okay. All right. Hands down. Okay. The reason that I ask is because I wanted to tell you about my wife and her dreams. And she's heard me tell this story before, but I didn't get permission to tell it today, so I may be in trouble a little bit later. But that's okay. You see, at my house, I'm a little bit of a night owl. My wife likes to get up early. She likes to go to bed early. I like to stay up late and sleep late. And so I think it was just God's kind of cruel joke in putting us together. But regardless of that, I love her to death. And so what happens in our marriage, and what happens especially early on in our marriage, was we would go to bed at the same time, and she would fall asleep, and I would turn on the TV, and I would watch SportsCenter 8 times until I was tired and wanted to go to sleep. That was kind of what would happen. I'd flip through the channels. And what I began to notice as I watched my wife sleep is that she would interact with me in her sleep and not remember any of it. Like, it was awesome. Like, she would say things to me, and she would do things. It was so funny. And I started to kind of recognize and pick up on some cues. My wife does this when she's getting ready to talk in her sleep or do something when she's really dreaming. She does this thing, and it's what I call she harumphs. Okay? She harumphs. Let me explain what that means. It means that typically she will move the covers in some sort of way, oftentimes violently, and she will go, that's what she does. She may or she may not move in bed. And so here's what I've learned in almost 16 years of marriage is that when my wife harumphs, pay attention, it's about to happen. Like something cool is about to come down. And so right after we had moved to Alabama, we had just moved into this house from Texas, and I was watching SportsCenter or whatever it was on TV. I don't remember. And my wife harumphed and rolled over to where her face was facing me. And so I just kind of paused. You don't want to move because you don't want to wake her up because it might ruin what happens next. And the thing that I noticed, her eyes were closed. She was definitely asleep, but her eyebrows were furrowed. So I was thinking to myself, I don't know, maybe she's concentrating on something. Maybe she's trying to drive a car in a snowstorm. Like, I don't know what it was in her dream, taking a standardized test. I don't know. Something was going on inside of her. And then she did this. She did this. I'm in so much trouble later. She opened her mouth. And this is what came out. And then she cried, and then she closed her mouth back. Now, by this time, I'm laughing hysterically. The bed is kind of starting to shake a little bit, and it was shaking enough with my laughter that she awakened. Now, when she woke up, 2 emotions flooded over my wife immediately. The first one was embarrassment, because she knew that she had said something or done something in her sleep that was so hilarious, he was going to use it as a sermon illustration later. The second thing that happened was she then began to start laughing because as she was coming into consciousness, she began to realize what it was had been going on. And so I asked her, I said, Jody, what in the world have you been dreaming? And she said, okay, so here's the situation. We were in our old church, and I mean like the church that we started going to when we were in seminary. It had a big choir, and Jody sang in the choir. Our music minister was named John Frank Reed, and she said, and John Frank had given me a solo to sing in this choir thing, and I was like, yeah, that all of that is reasonable. Like all of that sounds about right. And she says, and it was a really high part, which for Jody is not a big deal because she's a soprano, so she can sing kind of high. And so I was like, yeah, okay. And she said, and no matter what I could do in rehearsal, no matter what I did, I couldn't hit those high notes. Like I just couldn't do it. No, it just wouldn't come out. I couldn't figure it out. And so I finally what I said in my dream was, I'm just going to give it all I've got on this very last one. And you know what happened? So what happens is she was dreaming that she was going to sing this high note, but because she was going to put forth so much effort to sing it, her real body, like her body in real time under the covers, harumphed and went, oh, out loud. That was all that came out of her mouth. And she was like, I was singing, wasn't I? And I was like, oh yeah, you were singing. It was wonderful. It was wonderful. Have you ever noticed that like sometimes when you're dreaming and things are hard to do, like for me, it's always I'm running somewhere, running from something, running to something, playing sports or something along those lines, and I just can't make my legs go. Do you know what I'm talking about? I just can't. It's like they're in quicksand, and I'm so frustrated about it. I've come to realize that what's happening is your body, my body in real life, in the bed is going, I should move my legs, but my brain is going, you're asleep. And so, like, it's just not going to happen. And the thing is, you all have had dreams. You all have had these moments of lucid thought or whatever it was in your sleep, where something seemed so real and something seemed really be impacting your life. And the thing is, sometimes our dreams are just the result of bad chalupas. But sometimes those dreams are placed there by God. It's a dream that He planted in your heart. Sometimes those dreams from God don't come while we're asleep, but they come while we're awake. And He speaks to you in what Bill Hybels calls that whisper. You know, that's what God wants for my life. That's the direction that He wants me to go. That's the dream that God has planted inside of me. Last week, what we talked about is no matter what your dream was, we all know what it's like on some level to have our dreams dashed, to have things not turn out exactly the way that they were supposed to. The marriage didn't work, the family didn't turn out, the business didn't go through, the promotion didn't happen. The bank account isn't where it's supposed to be. The kids didn't respond the way. We all know on some level what it's like to have this dream, this vision of what it's going to be like, and then it not turn out that way. And last week we said that sometimes that it doesn't happen because of decisions that we make. Things that we did. I decided not to, or I decided to go, or I spent too much time doing X and I should have been doing Y. And we can look back on our life and we can pinpoint a couple different things where we go, the reason that my dreams didn't happen, the reason that it wasn't fulfilled in my life is because I made mistakes and I made some bad decisions along the way. Sometimes, however, it's decisions that are made for you, isn't it? Sometimes it's a spouse or a relative, a parent. Sometimes it's where you were born, the circumstances that surrounded your family growing up. Maybe it's an illness you were born with, or a doctor that comes in and says, I'm sorry, there's nothing you could have done. It's genetic. I don't know, but sometimes those decisions are made for us, and we can look back and we can see things didn't turn out the way I wanted them to in whatever area of my life because of decisions I made or decisions that were made for us. And if you're like a red-blooded American, which you are, like the next response then is to try to blame somebody. And that's what we all want to do, isn't it? We'll blame somebody else for our mistakes. We'll blame somebody else for our circumstances, and maybe the blame is justified. Sometimes we'll blame ourselves. We'll get real down on ourselves, and we'll battle that self-loathing. And if we're real honest with each other this morning, I hope we can be, sometimes we blame God. Ultimately, He was the only one that could do anything about it anyway, right? And so if we have to lay blame somewhere, it's got to be there. What I asked you to do last week, and we're going to come back to it in just a minute, is to start thinking about where it is you place blame. Whether it's on somebody else, who is it? Whether it's on yourself, whether it's on God. As we work through this series, as we work through this story, we'll come to find out just exactly what we're to do with that information. Last week we began the story of Joseph, and man, he had some dreams. He had some dreams about what it was his life was going to look like. And those dreams were actually given to him by God. Dreams that people would bow down to him. Dreams that he would be in authority. Dreams that he would be in power. But last week we ended our story with Joseph on a caravan heading off to Egypt. He had just been sold into slavery by his brothers. We asked the question, we said, imagine how he must have felt. Imagine where he would have placed blame. Well, it's my daddy's fault because daddy made me his favorite. And if daddy hadn't made me his favorite and made me that amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, then nothing would be wrong. Maybe he blamed himself and he thought, you know what? I have zero relational skills. And I made some bad mistakes saying some things to my brothers that I probably shouldn't have said. It's on me. Or, you know what? They're the ones that sold me into slavery. It's their fault. Or how about this? You know what? God's the one that gave me the dreams. If God had just kept that vision to himself, then I wouldn't be in this spot. And today what we're going to do is we're going to take a peek back into the story of Joseph and see what happens next. As we work our way through the story of Joseph, I want you to recognize that it's not just Joseph's story, but it's your story. It's my story. It's the story of anyone who's had dreams that didn't turn out the way that they thought they should turn out. So let's take a look. And we're in Genesis as we continue working through this. Now, as you turn to Genesis chapter 39, let me tell you some things about this. We're going to try to cover 2 whole chapters of this story tonight, okay? Today, this morning. It's not tonight. Will be tonight. Later. Right now, it's this morning. Okay, we're going to try to cover 2 chapters, and so there's a lot of verses that we're going to kind of want to cover, and so I'm not going to read every single one of them. I encourage you to go back and read chapter 39, chapter 40 for yourself. We're going to work our way through this, and I'm going to read a little bit and talk a little bit, and read a little bit and talk a little bit, okay? Look at Genesis chapter 39, beginning in verse 1. Air keeps blowing my face. Okay. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt. Potiphar, an Egyptian who was one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard, who bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him there. The Lord was with Joseph, so that he prospered and he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. Now we have to pause here for just a second because there's a couple of things that I want to kind of make sure that when I read this, like I can't wrap my head around. You see, Joseph is sold as a slave to a man named Potiphar, who is one of Pharaoh's officials. And that is fine. All of that is kind of easy to understand. But verse 2 is where I really get hung up. Because verse 2 says this: God was with Joseph, and he prospered in the house of his master. Now, let me tell you why I have a problem with that. Because I kind of feel like if God's with you, you don't have a master. You with me? I kind of feel like if God is going to bless me and be with me, if the Lord remembers me, I'm probably not a slave. You tracking with me? Let me tell you why that's what we think. Because we think of God less as the master of the universe and more as a genie in a bottle than we'd like to acknowledge. Let me make sure I say that again, because that's really, really neat. We like to think of God more as a genie in a bottle than as the God of the universe. What that means is that when something bad happens to us, or something doesn't go our way, or we need God in some way, what we're real quick to do is go and rub the genie bottle and say, God, I need, God, I need, God, I need, God, do, God, do, God, do. And he's that guy that's going to pop out of the bottle and go, you ain't never had a friend like me. Come on, right? Don't we think that about God? And so when things don't go the way that we want, then the only thing we're left to do is to question the power of the genie. But we forget God is not a genie in a bottle. He's the God of the universe. And he's at work even when it doesn't make sense to us. And he's at work fulfilling our dreams and his dreams for our life, even when it doesn't quite make sense to us. I'm going to tell you, one of my biggest struggles, and I think I've shared you this before, but it was this reality I came to laying in a hospital bed in Bethesda, Maryland, hundreds of miles away from friends and family that could come and check in on me and love me and hug me and play Trivial Pursuit with me, whatever it was. And it was that moment that where you realize that God, you had given me these dreams. You had told me that I was going to impact lives. You had told me that I'd be able to share your gospel with all kinds of people. God, that was the dream you implanted in my heart, to be healthy and to have a family and to be able to grow with that family. And here I sit in a hospital bed. God, if you really loved me, God, if you really remembered me, God, if you really thought anything about me, I wouldn't be in this hospital bed. Maybe you felt that way. The circumstances of your life haven't gone the way that you want them to go. The spouse walked out. The kids abandoned you. Your mom and dad don't talk to you. The bank account is on zero. The house is in foreclosure. You fill in the blank right there. Things aren't going the way that you want them to do. Our natural kind of response is to go, well, God surely is not with me in this. And if I was just, look, this is where we go next. And so if I was just good enough, if I was just a little bit better, if I just gave a little more money, if I just showed up a little more at church, if I just helped the poor a little more, then maybe God would remember me. And maybe my circumstances would change. I'm telling you, if that's the way you're thinking, your God is a genie in the bottle, not the creator of the universe. Joseph is not where we would picture someone that had the favor of God. And yet Scripture is very, very clear. God was with Joseph. I can't even begin to get my head around that. Let's move on. So what happens is this man Potiphar sees that God is with Joseph, and he starts to give him a little bit of responsibility, and give him a little bit of responsibility, and give him more responsibility. Eventually, Joseph comes to run his master's house. He's still a slave. He's still under the authority of Potiphar, but Scripture tells us that the only thing Potiphar worried about in his house was what he was going to eat or drink. That was it. Potiphar didn't worry about any of the affairs, didn't worry about his sheep, he didn't worry about his cows, he didn't worry about his other servants, he didn't worry about the upkeep of his house. Joseph took care of everything. And because God was with Joseph, not only did Joseph prosper, but Potiphar prospered. Take a look at chapter 39, verse 6. The second half of verse 6 says this. Now Joseph was well built and handsome. Now ladies, let me tell you, I'm going to put this in the JIV. He was fine, right? He was well built. He was muscular. He had it going on like he liked it. You know what I'm saying? All right? I just want to make sure you understand. He was well built and he was handsome. And after a while, his master's wife took notice of Joseph and said, "Come to bed with me." Now hold on a minute. Hang on a minute. So Joseph is good looking. Joseph's master, Potiphar, had a wife. Now, I don't know if she was attractive. She was probably older than him. We don't know how old Joseph is at this point. He's between the ages of 17 and 28. I'll tell you why we know that later. He's somewhere in that range, the prime of his life. And she takes note of him. She is the first recorded cougar in the Bible. That's it. That's all I know. That's all I know. All right. Now, so she recognizes him and she says to him, she says, "Look, I want to engage in some adult activities with you." Now, this puts Joseph in an incredibly, incredibly difficult situation. Because know that, do you think he was tempted? Of course he was. Do you think that Joseph was lonely? Of course he was. Do you think Joseph on some level thought this might fulfill some kind of hole in my heart that's been left when my brother sold me into slavery? Maybe. I don't know. What I do know is what temptation feels like. Don't you? Let's even go farther. Do you know what sexual temptation feels like? Do you realize that the pornography industry is a $97 billion a year industry worldwide? If it were to rank among gross domestic products of countries, it would be 63rd, almost the size of Ecuador. Wrap your head around that. The pornography industry is a third world country. It's huge. Social media puts it right at our fingertips. We have the internet on our cell phones. Come on. There's that lady that you work with. You don't have proper boundaries with her. There's that guy that you work with. You don't have proper boundaries with her. Listen, we all know what it's like to be tempted, and we all know what a wreck sexual sin can bring to our lives, don't we? Come on. We all know. Crosswind Church lives in the wake of it, don't we? Come on, we know what it's like, what sexual sin does. Joseph is tempted just like you've been tempted, just like I've been tempted. We have to recognize that in his own life. Look what he does. I love it. Look at verse 8. It says, but he refused. With me in charge, he told her, my master does not even concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he owns, he's entrusted to my care. No one in this house is greater than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against who? Tell me this. How come Joseph had false faith in God? Come on. Is his life living up to the dreams that God had put in his heart? No, but Joseph is concerned. He recognizes there's a God who's in control, and even though my circumstances don't look like they ought to look, that doesn't change the fact that God is still at work in my life. I'm not going to sin against God. And although she spoke to Joseph day after day, he refused to go to bed or even be with her. Let me tell you what that means. That means that not only did Joseph say, no, I'm not going to be with you, Joseph set up guardrails. He said, I'm not going to even go past this point. I'm not even be in the same room with you, much less in the same room with you alone. The reason is, I don't want to put myself in a situation where I could be tempted. I don't want to put myself in a situation where it becomes a matter of what she said versus what he said. Because at the end of the day, Joseph, although he has some authority in this house, is just a slave. Now, this is free. This has nothing to do with what I want to talk about today. There are some of you right now, you need to put up some guardrails. For some of you, that means you got to turn the internet off. For some of you, that means you got to get rid of your cable package. For some of you, that means you need to not be with that girl, not be with that guy. For some of you, it may mean you change a job. We've got to overcome this, because here's what I know. Regardless of your stance on sexual sin, here's what I know. Sex makes things more complicated, especially when it's outside of the bounds of marriage. Just true. It doesn't make things easier. It makes things more complicated. That's free. That's not what we're talking about. Okay? So Joseph sets up some guardrails, and he says, we're not even going to be in the same room with her, but she's not done with Joe. She's got a plan. Let's pick up the story again in verse 11. Verse 11. One day he went into the house to attend to his duties, and none of the household servants were inside. And she caught him by his cloak and said, come to bed with me. But he left his cloak in her hand, and he ran out of the house. So Joseph knew, if I'm ever in a situation where I'm alone with her, this could be bad. Because at some point she's going to accuse me of something, and then I'm in trouble either way. If I sleep with her, then I'm in trouble. There's no win for Joseph. And so he set these boundaries, he set these guardrails. One day she set a trap. Joseph walks in, there's nobody there. She grabs him. He takes Paul's advice, although Paul hadn't been born yet. In 1 Corinthians, flee from sexual immorality. Run away from it. That's what he does. He strips his cloak off and he's running out the door. But now she's got him. Now she has the evidence that she needs. If he'll turn her down day after day after day after day, then you know what? She has no more use for him. He's just Hebrew slave. Potiphar comes home at the end of the day. You may know the rest of the story. She's got his cloak. Potiphar comes in and he goes, what's that? And he said, oh, she blames Potiphar. She said, that Hebrew that you brought here, that Hebrew that you put in charge, that man that you have not withhold anything except me from, he tried to take advantage. Scripture tells us that Potiphar burns with anger. I want to tell you something. I don't think Potiphar burned with anger at Joseph. The reason is because he puts him in the king's prison. If he really believed that Joseph had tried to rape his wife, he would have had Joseph killed. He was just a slave after all. No. Potiphar can see right through this. Potiphar. He's angry, but he has no other recourse. Either he's going to make a fool out of his wife, or he's going to punish an innocent man. Well, I got to be honest with you, that's an easy decision for Potiphar. He sides with his wife and he puts Joseph in prison. I thought about this a lot this week. Joseph hadn't done anything wrong, yet he was suffering consequences. Joseph had done everything he could to handle it the right way, and yet he was the one that was suffering. Joseph had kept his faith in God. He had set up boundaries and guardrails. He had done everything the right way, and yet he was the one that was suffering in jail. And I thought, man, how many of us can relate to that? How many of us can really get that? You know what? Well, we've all made mistakes along the way, but the reason I'm in the circumstances I'm in right now has nothing to do with me. I was born with that disease. I was born with that problem. My mama and daddy didn't give me certain things when I was young, and as a result, I don't even know how to do what's right. Come on. We all understand what that's like. Last night, I went to, my wife and I went to the Bridge is a ministry here in town. We went to their fundraising banquet. And if you don't know about the Bridge, let me just tell you real quick. The Bridge exists to help women as they transition from a state of dependence to a state of independence. It grabs women. It helps with women that are coming out of abuse and drug addiction and all sorts of problems. And it gives them a place to stay in some sort. In some cases, it gives them training on how to handle money and clean a house and take care of kids and all of that. Our church helped support the Bridge ministry here in town, and we were there in the fundraising banquet. And Julie Huggins, who's the director of the Bridge, she began to talk about what's next for the Bridge. And one of the things that has come up again and again and again through Celebrate Recovery and through the Bridge's efforts has been sexual abuse. Statistically, worldwide, 1 out of every 4 girls under the age of 18 has been sexually abused. Wrap your head around that. 1 out of 4, 25%. And when you start to poll women that are coming out of abusive situations and drug addictions and living in poverty, that number goes up to almost as high as 7 out of 10 women found themselves sexually abused when they're 18 or under. Now, let me tell you why that's important for us today. You see, we all know on some level what it's like to suffer from the decisions that other people have made. But on some level, we can point back and go, yeah, but I made this decision, or yeah, but this led to this. These little girls, 18 and under, some of you are in this room, have been abused by men and women in their lives. Uncles, brothers, fathers, grandfathers, next door neighbors, babysitters, fill in the blank. And they had no decision to avoid. They were overpowered. They were younger. They were weaker. They were threatened. And their innocence was ripped out of them. And their purity was ripped out of them. And their life was forever changed. Why? Because of a decision someone else made. And let's just state the obvious. It's not fair, is it? It's not fair for those little girls. It's not fair for you when you suffer because of the decisions of other people. It's not fair when you're persecuted and have done nothing wrong. It's not fair. Here's the decision we have to make. When life hands us not fair, how do we respond? Because we can't always fix what has happened, but we can move forward from here, can't we? And Joseph found himself in prison, in jail, behind bars, in shackles, the stony lonesome, the big pokey, whatever it is you want to call it. He's there. And he only tried to live a holy life. That was it. That was all he tried. Look at what Scripture says next. Look at verse 20. Jump down to verse 20, the second half. This is what he said. But while Joseph was there in prison, verse 21, the Lord was with him. What? Are you serious? That doesn't even jive in my brain. How can God be with him if he's in jail? See, that's what we think. If God's with me, I'm not on a first-name basis with the jailer. If God's with me, I'm not in shackles bound up. If God's with me, I'm free, living my life, living the dream. Isn't that what we all think? But that's not where Joseph is, and that's not what Scripture teaches us. God was with him. Although it didn't make sense to Joseph, God was at work. Although it may not make sense to us, God has not abandoned you. Let's keep going. It's a cool story. We gotta keep going. We're running out of time. Chapter 40, verse 1. Sometime later, we don't know how long that is. Joseph was 17 when he was sold as a slave. He's somewhere in that time frame. Sometime later, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their master, the king of Egypt, and Pharaoh was angry with his 2 officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and he put them into custody in the house of the captain of the guard in the same prison where Joseph was confined. The captain of the guard assigned them to Joseph, and he attended them. And after they had been in custody for some time, each of the two men, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were being held in prison, had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. When Joseph came to them the next morning, he saw they were dejected. So he asked Pharaoh's official who were in custody in the master's house, "Why do you look so sad today?" Verse 8, "We both had dreams," they answered, "but there is no one to interpret them." And Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dream." Joseph is in jail. God blesses him. And he rises to a position of importance in the jail. Now he's running the jail. And these other two prisoners come in. They had upset Pharaoh, and it's the cupbearer. He was responsible for making sure probably a lot of the food for Pharaoh was safe for him to eat or drink. And there's the baker, and whatever they had done, they were both upset. But they had these dreams. It was an omen. The dreams on the same night. These same dreams should just recall to mind immediately the dreams that Joseph had already had. And they're distraught because we know these dreams must mean something because we had them on the same night. We've been talking about them. We remember them. We have no clue what it means, and so they're sad. Joseph comes to them, and he says these words that I don't want us to miss. Do not interpretations belong to God. Let me tell you why it's important. Joseph could have used this as an opportunity to make himself look good. He could have used it as an opportunity to maybe elevate himself a little bit more. He could have used an opportunity maybe to gain some influence with other people in the jail, maybe even catch the ear of Pharaoh as a man that interprets dreams or has the power to interpret dreams. But Joseph refuses to take any credit. No. If anybody's going to interpret your dreams, it's going to be God. The reason that this blows my mind, I get to thinking about how easily dissatisfied we are. How easily frustrated we are with God. Isn't it true? See, when things are going well in our lives, we like to kind of point to our efforts a lot of times. At that point, it's real easy to kind of go, man, look at what I've accomplished. Look at what I've done. And I'm going to go to church and I'm going to sing praises to God because He's given me the ability to do so many things. But the first moment that something seems to go wrong, the first moment that the first dream doesn't turn out the way we wanted, the first moment that it doesn't quite add up the way that we thought it should add up, it's as if everything kind of turns, and then all of a sudden it's not look at me and what I've done. Now it's look at God and how He's forgotten me. Look at God and how He's let me down. I think, man, we are so easily dissatisfied with our God. But Joseph has been sold as a slave. He's been falsely accused by his master's wife. He's been thrown in jail, and yet he recognizes that there's a God that's on the throne that's more powerful than him, that's at work behind the scenes and in the circumstances to produce in Joseph what it is that He wants to produce in Joseph. I think that if any of us had experienced the same amount of persecution that Joseph had experienced, we wouldn't be singing the praises of God in jail. And I wonder, church, what it looks like when persecution does come. When the struggle to be a Christian really does exist. I wonder what happens to the church. Will we be like Joseph and be able to sing praises to God even when our circumstances don't line up with what we think it ought to? Or will we push back and go, He's abandoned me, He's abused me, He's neglected me, He's forgotten me? I'm absolutely stunned by the faith that Joseph shows after all he's been through. Let me tell you about it. So the first person, the cupbearer, he tells his dream. He says there's these grapes and these shoots of vines and I'm holding them and I'm squeezing them into Pharaoh's cup. Don't quite know what that means. And Joseph says this. He says, well, I'll tell you what that means. It's great. In 3 days' time, you are going to have your head lifted up out of this prison and you're going to be restored to your position. Pharaoh's going to have thought through it all and he's going to find you innocent and he's going to place you back in the position that you have left. And then Joseph says this, and this is so important. Look down here in chapter 40. I want to make sure I get this right. Verse 14, and we read this. He says, but when all goes well with you, this is Joseph talking to the cupbearer. When all goes well with you, remember me and show me kindness. He comes just short of saying, get me out of jail. That's what he means, right? He says, remember me and show me kindness, mention me to Pharaoh, and get me out of this prison. There it is. I was forcibly carried off from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing to deserve being put in this dungeon. Here's what he says. He says, it's real simple. Look, I interpreted this dream for you. It's going to turn out well for you. I know that. You're going to see that in 3 days. When that happens, here's the one thing I want you to do. Remember me. That's it. Mention me to Pharaoh, get my full pardon, whatever it is. I just want you to remember. Now, the baker, who's sitting on the other side of the jail cell at this point, he hears the good report the cupbearer gets, and he's anxious to hear about his dream. And so I can only imagine hey, Joe, let's hurry up. Listen, let me tell you mine. Here's my dream. You ready? Here it is. I got these baskets, these 3 baskets, and there's this bread, and I'm up in it, like there's a tree, and there's these birds, and they're eating the bread out of my basket. And Joseph goes, oh, that's not good. See, your head's going to be lifted up as well, and then removed from you. Pharaoh is going to hang you from a tree, and here's the gross part. I'm sure your Bible. The birds are going to eat your flesh. You can only imagine. The baker probably felt pretty upset, right? I mean, like, hey, the other guy, like, maybe I should have gone first. I don't know. Joseph doesn't ask the baker to remember him because, sure enough, 3 days later, Pharaoh sends a messenger down to the jail. He says, bring me the cupbearer, bring me the baker. The cupbearer is restored to his position of authority with Pharaoh, and the baker is hung on a tree. Look at verse 23. I just want to read this. The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot. You want to press an insecurity button of mine. I'm going to be vulnerable for you. You really want to press an insecurity button of mine? You really want to make me feel bad about myself? Don't remember. Don't remember me when you're sending out invitations. Don't remember me when you talk about your friends. Don't invite me. Don't have me over. Don't talk about me. You really want to press an insecurity button? Forget me. Probably not a very godly thing to say. I'm just telling you because it's true. I like to be known. You like to be known, don't you? We all like to be known. That's why community is so important. That's why groups are so important. That's why we talk about it over and over again. Go to a group, get involved in a group. It's because we know everybody has hardwired in them the desire to belong, to be remembered, to be thought of. The man that Joseph helped in prison, he only asked one thing of him. I just need you to remember me. When we get to the end of it, he says he forgot him. So here Joseph sits in jail. Where are his dreams now? Who's bowing down to him now? Where's his mothers and brothers, father now? Where are they? They've all forgotten him. Back in Canaan, his father thinks he's dead. He's moved on with his life. He goes about his daily activities as Joseph doesn't even exist. His brothers, they don't think another thing about Joseph. He's gone. We got rid of that dream. The cupbearer, happily at work, has forgotten all about the man in prison. And if Joseph isn't careful, he'll come to the same conclusion about God, that God has forgotten him as well. Here's why this is so important. You see, one of the ways our dreams get dashed is when people forget us. When we seem invisible. It does something to us on the inside, doesn't it? It makes us feel worthless. It makes us feel less than human. It makes us feel left out. We all know what it feels like to be forgotten, not remembered, cast aside. Several years ago, I got to work with a man who had struggled with prescription drug addiction. He was using whatever pills he could get his hand on. He was stealing stuff from his wife and pawning it so he could get money. He had gotten a title on one of his cars. Like he was addicted, and he was really struggling with it. He had even turned to add alcohol to it just to try to supplement the times when he couldn't get the pills. He wanted to get that feeling. He wanted to escape no matter what it was. The thing about it was he didn't want to be addicted to anything. He didn't start out going, you know what I'm going to do is abuse prescription pain pills. No, he had a back surgery and had them prescribed to him, and before he knew it, he was hooked, and he had no way out and no one he could talk to. I could tell you stories about Robert. There were times I had conversations with him sitting in his living room. He had no recollection of him once he got clean. He had no memory of it. I mean, he went to rehab a couple different times. Drove him there one time, and trips to the emergency room. I could just go on and on and on and on. Finally, he had gotten clean, and he wasn't using drugs anymore. He was still struggling with alcohol some, and just knowing where to draw that boundary. And his wife had left him. She had divorced him and had remarried another man, and was living in his home with this other man, and essentially she had just kind of picked up with another guy and kept doing family, with him. And here was Robert kind of on outside looking in, and I'll never forget the night that he called me. He was driving home from his house, where his wife and his kids were. They had been celebrating birthday for one of his kids. They had invited him over because he's dad. He's clean now, and everything is great. He said the party was fine, Jeremy, and I understand why she divorced me. I understand all that. At the end of the night came, the party was over. And it was very clear I was to leave. It wasn't my house anymore. She wasn't my wife anymore. My kids are going to stay here with them. I have to go. He called me as he was driving home. He wanted me to talk him out of going to the liquor store. He said, Jeremy, I just feel like I'm invisible. I just feel like I don't exist. I know I made stupid decisions. I know I made mistakes. But Jeremy, they've forgotten completely about me. They're paying no attention at all to me. No, there's no one that I can talk to. There's no one that is calling to check in. There is no one. Jeremy, I've never felt so alone, so forgotten that I do right now in my life, and all I want to do is go get some liquor and forget about it for a few hours. I wonder if there's not more than one person in this room that couldn't go, yeah, I remember. I know what that feels like. To be forgotten. Joseph felt it. You know what I wonder? I wonder if we had gotten Joseph a piece of paper and a pen. I wonder if we had given him a computer with email or whatever, if he had an opportunity to write a letter to his brothers from jail. I wonder what he would have said. If he had an opportunity to write a letter to his dad, I wonder what he would have said. I wonder if he had an opportunity to say something to Potiphar's wife. There in that jail cell, forgotten, unremembered. What would he have said? I wonder if he could have said something to that there. What he would have said. See, here's what I want you to start thinking about. Last week we asked you. Start thinking about where you lay the blame for your broken dreams. Where do you lay that? Because whether it's godly or not, we're going to get there in just a little while. Just stick with me. Come back next week. Here's the thing. Whether it's godly or not, we all lay blame, don't we? So what I want you to ask is, where are you holding bitterness? Where are you ascribing blame? Where are you laying fault? Maybe it's with an individual. Maybe it's with yourself. Maybe it's with God. Maybe it's with a group of people. That's it. I want you to think about that. And here's what I want you to do. When they've forgotten you, when they haven't remembered you, when they've moved on with your life, here's what I want you to start thinking about. If you had an opportunity to take out a piece of paper and a pen, or pull out a computer with an email address and send them a letter, send them an email, shoot them a text, what would you say? today, in just a minute, Matt and the team are going to come back up and they're going to lead us in one more song. And what I want us to do today is I want the song we sing to be a prayer of our heart. I want it to be a cry out to God. That even though our flesh may fail, and even though things may not work out the way we want them to, and even though we may want to lay blame with everybody else, God, help me to maintain my faith in you, like Joseph did. God, help me to realize that you will never abandon me. You will never forsake me. You will never abuse me. You will never forget me. Because although the person sitting next to you has the capacity to forget you and not remember you, your God has not forgotten you. Even though your circumstances may not be what you thought they'd be, and even though your dreams haven't turned out the way that you thought they would, you have a God that promises you He will never leave you, and He will never forsake you. Although it may not make much sense now, doesn't mean that God's not at work. I can't wait to share with you the rest of Joseph's story, starting this week. First, let's pray and respond